Hi, welcome to the show. Well, Avatar, the movie that defined 3D in the public consciousness, has returned to theaters. But there's one pressing question that is not getting a lot of coverage. Many will tell you it's coming to 3D theaters, obviously. It's coming to IMAX. It's also coming to Dolby Cinema. And even in the re-release trailer itself, it mentions prominently that it's a new 4K HDR remaster. But one thing that isn't being talked about, barely at all, is high frame rate. Okay, so let's get some things out of the way. First of all, Avatar was already released on Blu-ray. This is the exclusive 3D Blu-ray edition released by Panasonic. Well, it was exclusive back then at first. It just contains the movie on a Blu-ray disc, and later on, deluxe edition with bonus material was released, as well as an extended cut of the film. So the first thing to clear up is that the extended cut was not released on 3D Blu-ray, and it is not the current re-release. That is the theatrical cut. Now, as for the resolution, frame rate, all that in this new remastered version, for those who don't know, standard Blu-ray and Blu-ray 3D only supports 1080p standard dynamic range at up to 24 frames per second. There is currently no standardized 4K 3D HDR home video format that is compatible across devices. But maybe with a push like this, it'll finally start to be a thing. So, just to get this out of the way, most theaters have 2K projectors, and 2K is, for all intents and purposes, another way of saying 1080p. So, at your local theater, you're not going to be seeing an actual 4K version. That's what it was mastered at, but it's going to be downsampled to 1080p. And most theaters also use RealD technology, those passive, cheap, polarized glasses that you wear. And those are often also used in conjunction with individual theaters' proprietary premium offering, like 4DX or other things like that that are specific to a theater chain. If you want to guarantee you'll see the actual 4K version, then you'll want to go to a premium theater such as IMAX or Dolby. Now, it doesn't end there, so let's unpack that a little bit. So, starting with Dolby. Dolby Cinema is a premium 4K theater. But this is not to be confused with Dolby 3D. Dolby 3D was a competitor of RealD passive glasses that is really barely in operation anymore. Dolby 3D theaters are very hard to find nowadays. But Dolby Cinema is a completely different thing. That's where you can go if you want to see the 4K version. Now, IMAX, some will and some won't, because IMAX has licensed their name for use in retrofitting some theaters, what some have referred to as LIMAX. It's not like back in the day where every IMAX theater was many stories high, like enormously, obscenely huge. IMAX screens are still big, but when they're implemented into theater chains, they're often smaller versions and have the seating arranged closer to the screen. And some IMAX uses 2K 1080p projectors. They noticeably have more faded colors and less detail, of course. So if you're going to see IMAX, you got to see IMAX with laser. That's what it's called, IMAX with laser. And that's the 4K version. Whether it's at a true huge IMAX screen or at a LIMAX screen that was retrofitted, either way, you'll get sharper, brighter image. The RealD and 2K IMAX versions are stuck at 24 frames a second. And also, from what I heard, maybe others can confirm this, comment below, please share your experiences, but I was talking on the 3D Blu-ray group and asking for input about this, people's experiences, and I was told that there's different types of IMAX with laser. So, oh boy, this gets confusing. So, if it's an early installation of IMAX with Laser, a dual laser system, I've been told it's not compatible with high frame rate. But if it's a newer IMAX with Laser that's single laser, then that supports high frame rate. And there's actually a website for this that has a chart of IMAX locations. Unfortunately, the page says that it's likely not going to be updated, but at least for now, it can give you a recent picture of what theaters have what type of projectors by location. So I'll put that link in the description below. And in that on that web page, it has a key to show you which ones out of the laser locations have dual laser or single laser. It's really annoying that they made this so complicated and so hard to find out. They just don't advertise up front which locations have the high frame rate version. So now that we've talked about all that, what is high frame rate version? Well, actually, I've been calling it the wrong thing the whole time, for the sake of simplicity. Yes, there have been high frame rate movies in the past that were recorded at 120 frames a second, only because this could be downsampled evenly to other common frame rates that are usable at home, like 60 and 24. And then there have been movies that merely doubled the frame rate from the standard 24 to 48. And unfortunately, those are not available on Blu-ray with current technology. But this remaster of Avatar is doing something new. Something that could be called VFR.
VFR from here on.
What's VFR?
What is VFR? Variable frame rate. Yes, it involves high frame rate and standard frame rate, but it varies. It jumps between high and normal. But why? First of all, any movie suffers from movement at 24 frames a second because it's just not enough frames to keep up with the action, and it has a jittery look to it. And in 3D, this is only exacerbated. So when variable frame rate introduces high frame rate at key locations like panning shots or action shots, and then it moves to standard 24 frames a second for calm shots or people speaking, close-ups, things like that, then it's able to somewhat solve those problems that 24p causes and also keep that look of a movie that people are used to. Notice I said people are used to. I'm just going to come right out and say it. I don't think variable frame rate is necessary. In fact, I think it's less than it could be. Not because I don't like high frame rate, but because it's not enough of it. Now, some people feel very strongly about this, and you'll notice, if you open your mind just a little bit, that emotion is at the top of this list. Yes, emotion. High frame rate is objectively better. Chances are, just by pure statistics, you probably disagree. But think about your reasons. You might say it doesn't look like a movie, or it looks like a soap opera. If you're honest with yourself, these are 100% societal constructs based on what you're used to, what you think a movie should look like, in many people's own words. By referencing a soap opera, that's proof positive that that's where the concept came from in the beginning. Now, obviously, soap operas don't run at high frame rates. They run at 30 frames a second, which is just a little higher. But that's what some people call it, just because it's higher than 24. But honestly, this looks great, especially in 4K. When it shifts to that high frame rate sequences, it's like cleaning up the picture. It's so smooth, and it's more realistic. Some might say, I don't want it to be realistic. It suspends my disbelief. Honestly, that is akin to saying, don't shoot in 4K. Make it fuzzier so we don't see the special effects or things like that. But really, improvements in resolution over time has also been accompanied by improvements in visual effects. And this is proven time and again when old movies are remastered for Blu-ray. You can see the antiquated techniques for many special effects that are much more glaring nowadays compared to newer content. But that is not the fault of the presentation method, which is again objectively superior. It is the shortcomings of the pre-existing content. It's just showing them for what they are. And another point in that regard is 24p was settled on at the beginning of the talkie era. It was to settle on a standard because frame rates used to be variable back then. People would wind cameras, for goodness sakes. They had to settle on a frame rate somewhat least possible. They weren't shooting for clarity, just what they could get away with, and then have a standard to stick to. So there's nothing intrinsically noble about 24p. It's not a holy number. Sometimes change takes getting used to. I've also heard, sure, high frame rate is fine for nature documentaries, but not for movies. I beg to differ. If it looks better, it looks better. And the whole point of all these other things, surround sound, 3D, 4K, HDR, the whole point is to make it more believable and immersive. So to have that one outlier high frame rate somehow be different, it really isn't. And if you like 3D, you may also notice that the attitude of some towards HFR, high frame rate, is very similar to the attitude of 3D critics. Let's be honest, it's very similar. It's a staunch aversion. Maybe it can't even be put into words, or at least logical ones, but it's a staunch aversion. So just something to think about. You got to try your vegetables so you can grow big and tall, and you got to try your high frame rate more than once and get accustomed to it if you aren't already, but many are, and it is a beautiful thing. And like I said, I wish the whole movie was in high frame rate because they really didn't do enough. When they did, it was stunning. And sometimes the cut from 24 to 48 was like after a shot began, so it wasn't always the smoothest, but some high frame rate is better than none. And hopefully they release this at some point for home media in the future if ever some new format comes out. But if you want 24p, there are plenty of theaters showing it that way, so no need to worry. Just like people who hate 3D are upset about 3D showings, no, there's plenty of 2D to go around. The 2D version will always be there, and the 24p version will always be there. But if you want that variable frame rate version, make sure it's an IMAX with laser. If you want to be extra sure, make sure it's a single laser. That's what I was told. That's what I confirmed. I went to a single laser IMAX, and it was variable frame rate. So that at least I can say with confidence that is where you can see it in that format. And appropriately, this is the first time I noticed this, appropriately the movie ends with the shot of the eyes opening. I mean, two eyes opening, how appropriate for a 3D movie, right? So go catch it while you can. I'll see you next time.